just like gotten my guy established like really, really well.
All right. So, how did the requirements document go?
I hate you.
Everybody get it done, get it submitted. It's not
Except
too bad.
Except Dave. Or not $8.
No, I was 4 minutes over the assigned due date, or due time.
All right, so for next week, we are creating our specifications document. So after, so we'll meet on the Thursday. We'll meet next Tuesday and kind of talk about what's happening next. Then we'll start not meeting. I will still expect updates and for you to meet with me individually on a weekly basis if that would benefit you. But we won't be meeting as a group because you should be spending that time working on your project. That's the idea, okay? So let's talk about the specifications document and kind of its goal today. So you should, and I put up an example on the assignment to kind of walk you through it a little bit, but you should start with your requirements document. We want to think about what's the purpose of the specifications document. So the specifications document takes your requirements document and says, okay, here are my 20 requirements. For each of those requirements, this is how I will actually accomplish it. Right? That is what technology I'm going to use, and then the algorithm that you're going to use to solve it. Now, when I say algorithm, that doesn't necessarily mean programming, right? So the example I put up on the assignment was, let's say that my goal for today was making a lasagna. That would be in my requirements documentation. Well, for that, it would just be a Post-it note, right? Today, make lasagna. Okay, that's what goes in the requirements document. Specifications document is going to take that and say, okay, here are all the steps for making lasagna. All right, so I'm going to specify the various cheeses, the things that I need to get. Okay, the products I'm going to need in order to solve this problem. All right, so pick the cheese, pick the pasta, all that stuff. So you need to specify the various technologies you're going to need to solve this particular problem. And then you're going to tell me how you're going to apply those technologies together to solve the problem. So now it's effectively a lasagna recipe, right? Right, so preheat the oven, all those steps. Unambiguous steps that I can follow to ultimately create a lasagna. Now, having said that, keep in mind that in the specifications document, you are not actually implementing your solution. You are designing the implementation. You are creating the pseudocode or the algorithms for each part of that. You're going to be researching the different technologies you're going to use. You're going to have to talk about how you're going to use those guys together. Step-by-step approach on how you're going to solve this problem. Now, at what level of detail does that need to be in? So, for example, let's take the lasagna thing as an example. If you're giving me instructions for making a lasagna, you're going to give me the instructions as if I'm a human, right? You're going to say, you're not going to tell me how to bend fingers and stuff like that to grip cheese and pasta noodles and things like that. So you can make an assumption that the person who's going to use this document is you, okay? And you need to keep in mind that I have a pretty good idea of each of your capabilities. So if I read it and you say, well, for me, all I have to do is say, solve the entire problem, and that's good enough. It's fine. Okay, it's probably not going to fly, but you are the audience. So if you say, well, I'm going to use these 3 different software packages, and I'm going to use the first one in this way, the second one in this way, and the third one in this way, and this is how I'm going to connect them together, even if there's 30 steps in between, as long as you're building that the generalistic solution that you can then follow as kind of paint by number, if you will, when you go to actually implement this, that's fine. Because frankly, you don't want all those granular steps because things can get lost in the middle, right? So the specifications document needs to be granular enough to keep you on task, but not so granular that you burn out halfway through the solution because, well, the C key isn't working and it's telling me I need to press that. So somewhere in the middle. But understand that you should be able to sit there with that specifications document as you're working on your project, and maybe you're doing this on let's just say your requirements are in the order that you're going to implement stuff. You should literally every single day be able to sit down, pick up in the requirement you left off, in the step you left off, and continue on from there, and it tells you where you're going. And you should be able to take your requirements document and check things off as you're going. this is done, this is done, this is done, so on and so forth. Kind of make sense? So my advice, you can find plenty of templates for specifications documents out there, but understand the purpose of it. Okay, the purpose of it is to further define your requirements document. So my preference would be take your requirements document as a starting point, go into each requirement, and now solve that problem in pseudo language. Give me a recipe for solving that problem. Okay, not actually solving it, you're telling me how you will solve it. Next step will be take that specifications document, which is done in terms of your requirements document, and now actually solve it. Now, does that mean you might not make some different decisions that you might have said in your specifications document you're going to do it this way, and then when you actually start working on it, you might realize, oh, I thought this worked like this, it actually works like this, so I have to deviate from this a little bit, but this at least put me on the right track. Okay, so part of this software development life cycle to kind of get your stuff done, and why this initial setup is important, is it's causing you to think about your problem. Think about it in multiple iterations before you ever just sit down and start working on it, with the hope that as you get into the problem and you actually start solving it, the number of things you have to backtrack on is minimized, right? I guarantee that every single one of you is going to bump into some things that were more difficult than you expected. You're going to hit things that are less difficult than you were expected. I've been reviewing a couple of the requirements documents that folks have sent me, and some of the sections I think about, like, well, I don't know if that's going to take 40 hours, but with my glasses off, if we're throwing darts and the dartboard's the size of an Olympic swimming pool, maybe.
So you read mine is what you're saying.
So so the punchline is there is going to be aspects of the project that are going to be less difficult than you expected. There's going to be aspects that are going to be more difficult than you expected. Then there's things that, and this was something that Schumacher brought up to me the other day, and keep in mind this is something I've been doing this a while, so I'm pretty good at knowing how long something should take you, as opposed to how long something might take me. All right, so just because I could do it in, let's say, 20 minutes, doesn't mean it won't take you 10 hours. Okay, but if I can do it in 20 minutes, it probably shouldn't take you 40. Does that make sense? Except for maybe Evan. Maybe enter. Scientific notation. he's still wearing his Broncos gear. He finally got the vomit off of it.
Still getting that.
Well, I figured all the partying there was. You were in
No, that was the bathroom. That's what that was for.
The hangover.
Pizza Hut just destroyed me.
Oh, really? This really happened?
Oh yeah.
Oh, so I've been making up this story and there's truth?
Yeah.
Where's the pictures?
That happens more times than it should.
Where's the pictures?
All right, so questions about the specifications document?
How long should it be?
Go ahead.
Can you go over an example? Let's say I wanted to implement a login page. Can you just go over an example of how we would specify how we go about doing that?
Okay, so login or registration page?
Registration.
So I think registration probably makes more sense because login, we typically say there's going to be a username, there's going to be a password. So registration might be a little different depending on your project, right? Here's the information you want to capture about a user. So you're going to say, okay, well, I'm going to, on this page, I'm going to have a series of text boxes. So you don't have to define each individual text box, but you're going to say, I'm going to have a series of text boxes, one for username, one for password, one for confirm password, one for email address, and maybe one for something strange that's applicable to just your project. Maybe it's date of birth or something like that because you send them a birthday coupon or something, whatever. So here's the pieces of information I'm going to capture related to registration. So that's the data input part of it. Now, where am I registering? So you've already mentioned, I think, let me try to remember, your back-end technology. What did you pick? Have you picked one yet?
I did. I didn't use Parse. I had to look at another one.
Firebase?
Don't think so. It was.
Firebase.
It's Basebox.
Basebox. Okay, fair enough. So you're going to use, the technology you're going to use for registration is, I assume Basebox has a built-in user authentication system. So you're going to be leveraging, so you're going to say in there, I'm going to leverage Basebox's user authentication system. You might even give yourself a link to that documentation page, saying, okay, there's a quick way to get to this place. Now I'm going to use their tools to ultimately, so I'm going to create a, if you just kind of glance at their tools and you look at the high level of it. So if I think about this in terms of parse, since I haven't used Basebox, so what am I going to do? I'm going to create a PF user. I'm going to fill in the 6 pieces of information I read in from these text fields. And then I'm going to ask that PF user to go ahead and save itself. Now the user's been registered. Okay, and that would be user registration. If you also then dictate after a user's been registered, I want to make sure I go back to the main login screen to have them log in, or maybe you decide I want them to just automatically be logged in. You can make that decision, but that would be kind of that those steps. What information are you capturing? What technology you're going to use to handle the registration process, and then maybe the high level description of how you will use that, of how that technology works. Generally speaking, if there's 30 lines of code that ultimately accomplish it, you don't have to tell me about all 30 lines of code. Give me the 2,000 foot view of, in parse, it's basically, as an example, in parse we say we're going to create a PF user, we're going to tell that PF user to save itself in the background, then there's a callback function, and if it got saved correctly, we get a user object back, and if then what are we going to do? We're going to take that user object and grab some of its information and do something with it. That's fine. You don't have to tell me all those granular pieces unless they relate to the requirement itself. Okay, but I do want to know that I'm going to create this kind of thing. I'm going to tell it to register the user, and then I'm going to go back to the login page. That's the steps for registration. That make sense? Okay, what else?
How long should it be?
Same answer as usual. Long enough.
Realistically, it would probably be longer than
The requirements?
the requirements.
Well, seeing as though you're basing it off the requirements document, I would expect you to write something else. So, it's like, here's the requirements document. I think this speaks for itself. So yeah, it should be longer than the requirements document, but only because it's based on the requirements document. The amount of new material might not necessarily be longer than the requirements document's original work was. In fact, it's kind of maybe a little bit different in nature. It's because you're the audience for that one. The customer or the client is the audience for the requirements document, because that's kind of that contract between you and them on what features will be there. You're the audience for this one, where you're kind of reminding yourself, doing a pre-solution, going through and almost putting together a game plan for solving this based on those requirements. And then when it's showtime, now you have your game plan, it's time to actually execute that game plan. That's where you're hoping your game plan keeps you on some sort of reasonable track, where certain things are a little bit harder, certain things are a little bit easier, and in the end, the hope is that your estimated hours is in the ballpark of the hours you thought it was going to be. What else? Going once. Going twice. All right. I'll see everybody on Thursday.
I paid $50.
Sold. I don't know, but I get $50 apparently.
You don't want to know.